On a cold winter morning, January 17, 1899, in the hustle and bustle of Brooklyn, one of the liveliest parts of New York, Alphonse Gabriel Capone was born. In the land of dreams and promises, his parents, Gabriel and Teresina Capone, Italian immigrants, faced daily challenges in search of a better life. Their home, modest and cramped, was filled with love and hope, but also with the struggle for survival. Little Alphonse grew up listening to stories of the old world while breathing in the energy of the new. The streets of Brooklyn were his playgrounds, where languages, cultures, and dreams mingled. Growing up in poverty, he witnessed the harsh reality of life that spared neither the old nor the young. His youth was intertwined with the sounds of streetcars, loud conversations of merchants, and the everyday bustle of the city that never sleeps. Despite the harsh conditions, Alphonse quickly learned the skills of survival on the streets. His father, Gabriel, worked as a barber, while his mother, Teresina, worked in a factory. Although they tried to provide a better life for their children, young Alphonse was drawn to the darker side of Brooklyn. Fascinated by street gangs and their charismatic leaders, he began to realize that the rules of the streets were not the same as the rules his parents tried to instill in him. Brooklyn was more than his home. It was his teacher, his mentor, and his playground. In its streets, Alphonse Gabriel Capone was shaped into the man who would one day become one of the most powerful gangsters in American history. In the labyrinth of Brooklyn's streets, between dusk and dawn, Alphonse Capone, still a young man, began his first steps towards a world that would mark him for life. His fascination with street gangs, who ruled like uncrowned kings of Brooklyn, was more than mere boyish admiration. It was his destiny slowly but surely taking shape. When Alphonse joined the ranks of the James Street Boys, it was not just a transition from boyish games to the world of men. It was his initiation journey into the dark depths of crime. This gang, composed of rough, streetwise men, gave him his first taste of real crime. Here he learned about theft, fraud, and ways to survive in the merciless urban jungle. Each lesson, each conflict, each success, and each failure on those streets was part of his informal education. His reputation began to grow as a member of the 5 Points Gang, one of the most famous and powerful criminal organizations in New York. Here, Capone was not just another gang member. He became an artist in the world of crime, someone who combined raw power with cunning and intelligence. With each day spent in the gang, his skills were refined, and his name became more well-known. The skills he acquired in these early years were the foundation for what would later become his empire. His sense of strategy, his ability to assess people and situations, and his cold-bloodedness in facing dangers were all lessons learned on the streets of Brooklyn. Capone didn't just learn how to survive. He learned how to dominate, to control, and to be a leader in a world where the only constant was change. When Alphonse Capone left the streets of Brooklyn and stepped into the vast and ruthless world of Chicago, he did not know that it was here his unstoppable rise would begin. Chicago, a city of tall buildings and even taller ambitions, was the perfect ground for a young man like Capone, ready to leave an indelible mark in the world of crime. His arrival in Chicago was like opening a new chapter in the book of his life. The city was in the throes of Prohibition, a time when the sale of alcohol was banned, but the craving for it greater than ever. Capone quickly realized that Prohibition was not just a limitation, but a huge opportunity. Under the mentorship of Johnny Torrio, one of the criminal magnates of the time, Capone learned the fine arts of managing illegal businesses and manipulating power. In this cruel and merciless world, Capone not only stood out, but began to dominate. His rapid ascent through the ranks of organized crime was the result of his combination of brutality, intelligence, and undeniable charisma. He became a figure both respected and feared. His influence grew along with his wealth, and his ability to foresee and manipulate events made him a key player in Chicago's underworld. In the era of Capone, Chicago was more than a city. It was a chessboard where he was the leading player. Every street, every bar, every dark corner of the city was part of his game. With each move, his influence spread, and his portrait, radiating both charm and threat, became a symbol of his era. But Al Capone's rise was not without challenges. With power comes hostility, with wealth comes envy, and with fear comes resistance. Capone had to navigate through a complex web of rivalries, betrayals, and personal ambitions. His ability to balance being a public darling and a ruthless underworld leader was a skill few possessed. In Chicago, Al Capone didn't just build an empire, he built a legend. His rise was a metaphor for the American dream, a reverse success story where the lines between law, power, and morality often blurred. In his world, every decision, every alliance, and every conflict was part of a bigger picture, a picture that would forever be remembered in American history. In the heart of Prohibition, a time when America tried to quench its thirst for alcohol with laws that banned it, Al Capone found his kingdom. Chicago, a city that never slept, was now in the hands of a man who knew how to turn legal restrictions into golden opportunities. Capone's empire, built on the foundations of alcohol smuggling, was more than a business venture. It was a symbol of resistance, a challenge to authority, and a kind of rebellion against the system. As Prohibition took hold, so did Capone's empire grow. His smuggling operations were not just well-organized, but also ingenious. Using a network of secret bars, known as speakeasies, and a complex distribution system, Capone ensured that the flow of alcohol never dried up. His business was not just about selling drinks. It was a symbol of freedom, an expression of defiance, and at the same time, a source of unprecedented wealth. In this world, where the law was more an obstacle than a rule, Capone stood out as a king. His name became synonymous with Prohibition, and his image, at times adored, at times despised, was constantly present in newspapers and on the streets. His charisma and ability to balance being loved and feared made him almost untouchable. But with power comes a price, and Capone's price was constant danger. During this period, Capone was not just a gangster. He was also a businessman, a patron, and sometimes a folk hero. His influence extended beyond the dark streets and secret bars. He participated in politics, manipulated the media, and was often considered a protector of the common man. His empire was a place where law and lawlessness intersected, where moral dilemmas became blurred, and the boundaries between right and wrong often disappeared. But within this empire, shadows lurked. Violence was frequent, and rivalries with other criminal groups were bloody and ruthless. Capone's empire, though powerful, was built on unstable ground, where each day could bring a new challenge, a new threat, a new battle to preserve what was created. In Al Capone's Prohibition empire, every day was a game of survival, a power play, a game that would ultimately define his fate. In the shadow of his successes and the empire he built, Al Capone faced the inevitability that accompanies every rise, a fall. All eyes were on him, not just those of the public and the media, but also those of the law, relentlessly seeking a way to catch him. Although Capone was a master at avoiding direct accusations for the numerous crimes attributed to him, his end did not come from the expected angle. Ironically, it was neither a bullet nor betrayal, but something much more prosaic: taxes. In 1931, after years of investigations and searches for evidence, Capone was charged and tried for tax evasion. His trial was more than a legal battle. It was a spectacle, a public show, where the worlds of law and organized crime collided. The courtroom was like a stage, and Capone the main actor in a drama that captivated the entire nation. The charges of tax evasion, although seemingly simple, were enough to bring down a man who appeared untouchable. The trial was tense, with witnesses alternating, accusations piling up, and a legal game of cat and mouse. Capone, who once ruled the streets of Chicago, was now trapped in a legal labyrinth with no way out. The conviction and sentencing of Al Capone not only marked the end of one man, but symbolized the end of an era. The fall of Al Capone was the downfall of an entire generation of gangsters, the end of the myth of the untouchable criminal, and an indicator that even the most powerful are not above the law. Sentenced to prison, Capone left the world he created, the world of speakeasies, smuggling, and power, and stepped into a world of cells, prison bars, and loneliness. Capone's prison days were far from the glamour and shine of his best days. Alcatraz, his prison home, was a harsh reality, a world without alcohol, without power, a world where his past deeds were just memories. In those years, Capone's health and mental status began to deteriorate rapidly. His empire, once indestructible, was now just a shadow in memories, and Capone, once powerful and feared, was just a man facing his destiny. After his release from prison, Al Capone faced dark and uncertain days. The famous gangster who once led Chicago through an eruption of violence and illegal businesses was now just a shadow of his former self. Syphilis, a disease he contracted during his immoral escapades, was slowly eating him from the inside. Mental problems plagued him, and his nights were filled with nightmares. Capone retreated to his villa in Florida. His villa was once a luxurious retreat where he enjoyed the benefits of his criminal empire. Now, it was empty and cold, and the garden that once brimmed with flowers and palms looked neglected and abandoned. Capone spent his days in a room, staring at the walls and reminiscing about his glory days. He remembered how he controlled the city of Chicago, how everyone bowed to him and feared him. But now he was just a sick man, helpless and lost. On January 25, 1947, fate finally took pity on Al Capone. He died in his villa in Florida, surrounded only by his sorrow and memories of past days. His death was quiet and unremarkable, far from the glamour and violence he once reigned over. But Capone did not leave without a trace. He left behind a complex legacy that remains a subject of fascination to this day. His name remains etched in the history of crime and the Mafia, and the legend about him continues as a story of a man who led Chicago through the darkest days of America's criminal past. As is often the case in stories about gangsters, the end came quietly and unnoticed. Al Capone left this world, leaving behind only the memory of his incredible power and fall from grace.